In this video, we're going to show you how to replace the driver's side exhaust manifold gasket located on the driver's side of your engine. I'm going to remove our center cap here. Just going to pop in through this little notch right here. Get behind there and pop that off. I'm going to use a 21mm socket. I'm going to loosen and remove our lug nuts. Once we have our lug nuts loose, go ahead and grab the wheel, slide it off and set it aside. Now what we're going to do from underneath is we're going to use our pole jack here, and we're going to use a block of wood. You can use your regular jack with a block of wood here underneath your oil pan. Now what we're going to do is we're going to slightly go ahead and raise our jack here, and what we're going to do is just apply some pressure on the oil pan, but we're not going to crank it up high. We just want to hold this here before we loosen and remove the bolts on our engine mount. Now up inside the driver's side wheel well area here, we have our driver's side motor mount. Now there's a metal heat shield right here. We're going to want to go ahead and remove the two 10mm bolts on the top of this heat shield. We're going to use our 10mm socket and our ratchet. Let's go ahead and zip these two bolts out. And we'll go ahead and pull that shield off. Underneath the heat shield is going to be two other bolts going through the motor mount and into the engine bracket itself. We just need to gain access to those there. Spin out that other bolt. Go ahead and pop that shield off and go ahead and remove that. So we're going to use our 18mm socket to go ahead and loosen and remove this nut. It might come out with the stud. Now on the other side, we have this 18mm nut as well. We did spray it down with some rust penetrant. All right, so we have our 15mm socket and our ratchet on the rearward bolt here. I want to go ahead and loosen this bolt. All right, here's our bolt right there. Let's go ahead and remove that, set that aside. All right, so we should be on the bolt there. All right. The bolt is moving for us. So we are using a 15mm deep socket to gain access to the forward horizontal bolt on the mount going into the mount bracket on the side of the engine. Now remember, we have the engine supported with our pole jack, where you should have your regular jack or whatever you have there supporting the engine. Because once a second bolt comes out here, the motor would normally collapse, and we don't want that to happen. In our particular case here, the bolts were a little bit stuck. We did use a little bit of heat on the aluminum itself. Nothing crazy, just enough to heat it up and get things to free up. We don't want to snap bolts inside the aluminum. Now at this point, what we're going to do is, this bolt feels like it's ready to come out. I'm going to go ahead and raise up the engine just a little bit by cranking up my pole jack here. That should lighten the load on that motor mount, and that bolt is a little bit easier coming out now. So we switched over to our shallow socket here for clearance issues, because the ratchet was coming close to the inside of the unibody there. So switch over to the shallow. We'll go ahead and zip this out the rest of the way. Got our ratchet out with our socket. Reach up there, grab that bolt, and go ahead and remove that. I'm gonna reach up there and go ahead and knock that mount loose. Next, what we're going to do is want to go ahead and remove this threaded stud here. It goes up into the base plate, into the bottom here. So let's go ahead and we're going to use our E8. It's an inverted Torx. We want to go ahead and loosen and remove this here. And do the same for the other side. Now that we have our studs out, I want to go ahead and raise up the engine just a little bit using our pole jack here. And we do have some movement of that motor mount, so I'm going to go ahead and try and pull that up and wiggle that out. Now we went ahead and raised the engine up just a little bit more to try and clear the exhaust and the intermediate shaft here. And we'll go ahead and work that mount out like so. What we want to do next is remove our heat shield off of our exhaust manifold. There's a series of 10mm nuts on studs here. There's a couple on the front here. There's one on the back, and then on the top we have another one. So we want to go ahead and loosen and remove those. So now I'm going to go ahead and reach up and grab the heat shield and try and work this off here. I'm going to try and lower the engine off of our pole jack a little bit. It looks like the back side of our heat shield is caught. I'm just trying to manipulate this up and over. There we go. Twist that down and out and remove it. Now what we're going to do is we want to go ahead and disconnect our exhaust pipe from our manifold. Our nuts are pretty rusty. We are using heat to heat this up. We don't want to break the stud off in this here because we're going to be reusing our exhaust manifold. We're going to remove the lower one first. That way the upper bolt is holding the rest of the exhaust. On this here, the particular nut on ours is a 1/2 inch. All right, we got our nut removed from that one there. All right, so we're going to use a couple extensions, 5/8 deep socket. We did also heat up this upper nut here. We're using a swivel to get up and around our cat. Okay. Remove that nut, I'll set that aside. Now we have our upper O2 sensor here. It comes off of our exhaust manifold, comes over to the connector. I'm gonna reach up here, pinch on this little tab. And disconnect that there. Bring that down. At this point here, we're gonna go ahead and start to loosen and remove our lower exhaust manifold studs here, or bolts, and then we'll go ahead and move to the upper ones here. This particular one is a 1/2 inch. These are a 10mm socket and our swivel with extension to go ahead and get to the smaller bolts here. All right, we get that back bolt out. So we're heating up one of our last 2 bolts on the top here. We'll go ahead and heat this one up, and we'll zip this one out, move to the left, take out our last one, and at that point there we should be able to go ahead and pull our exhaust manifold. Our last stud out here, and the exhaust manifold has separated from the cylinder head. Now with the manifold separated here, we're gonna go ahead, just gonna reach up and push that gasket up and out. Gonna reach up there and pull that out like so. So I'm gonna go ahead and feed our gasket out. We did go ahead and check the surface of the cylinder head and the exhaust manifold, and they're both clean. I'm gonna feed our gasket up and set that between. Gotta get that in the general area. Kind of set that in place like that. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and push the manifold up into place. I'm gonna put one of the studs in, and I wanna get that lined up on my gasket. Go ahead and push that through, and then I'm going to go ahead and push the manifold up in, and I want to try and get one of these studs started here. I got my socket and my extension, and I want to go ahead and get that bolt started, get a few threads in there. While it's held in place, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with the rest of the studs here. I'm going to go ahead and try and get these all started by hand, lining up that gasket and getting that all into place. So now that we have our 4 center bolts, we're gonna go ahead and we want to now snug down our 4 outside bolts. And this upper one here, I'm gonna go ahead and thread in as far as I can by hand. I'm gonna take a little bit to get that in there. And then I'm gonna go back up with my wrench. And we'll go ahead and finish getting that all the way in. Once this is bottomed out, we'll go ahead and move to the back. On the back side here, I'm gonna go ahead and spin in our bolts as far as we can. And we'll come back with our wrench. We'll bottom those out. We'll go ahead and torque all of these bolts down. Now we'll go ahead and torque down our exhaust manifold studs. We want to go ahead and torque them in a particular sequence. Now you're gonna have 8 studs here. You're gonna start at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. You want to go ahead and torque these down to 18 foot-pounds. Let's go ahead and get started. Then we got our center bolts done. I'm going to go ahead and get these. Let's go ahead and feed our heat shield up into place. Now ours was a little bit rusted on the back side. We did trim it up a little bit to take off the rough edges there. We need to feed our front section up and around. All right, we have that up onto our studs. Let's go ahead and get our nuts installed. Now on the upper rear, I'm going to go ahead and reach up there and install the nut onto the heat shield. I'll just get that started and thread that down as far as I can by hand. And once these 2 are on, I'll go ahead and move to the front. Let's go ahead and install our front lower nut here. Zip that on, and then I'll get my front upper one installed. Now, if you have the ability to do so, you want to go ahead and torque the heat shield nuts down to 70 inch-pounds. We're just going to go ahead and snug these down. Let's go ahead and tighten up the downpipe to the exhaust manifold donut here. Now that you have these two tight, you want to go ahead and connect our oxygen sensor again. So let's go ahead and do that. Press it together and you'll feel it and hear it click into place. You're all set. Let's go ahead and feed our motor mount up into position. At this point, what we're going to do is going to go ahead and use our screw jack to go ahead and raise up that motor just a little bit. And what I'm going to do is get our two vertical bolts to go in through the bottom and catch the mount plate on the bottom of our mount here. Just get those caught, and then we'll install the two bolts on the top going into the side of the motor. I'm going to go ahead and install our bolt here. Now, our initial bolts were compromised, so we went ahead and sourced two new bolts to replace what we had in there. Now, at this point, we're going to install our two horizontal bolts. We have to get them to line up with the engine. So at this point here, I'm just going to use one hand to apply a little bit of pressure on the bolts there. And with the other hand, I'm going to slowly lower our pole jack until we can get these bolts to catch. Looks like we get the threads caught on those there, so I'm going to go ahead and put my socket and ratchet on those there and try and snug those down. Now that we have the back one snugged down, we'll go ahead and snug down the front one. Now on these horizontal bolts, we're just going to make sure that these are good and tight. We have our vertical bolts going up into the plate here. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and slowly lower our screw jack, letting the engine weight come down on the mount. Now our engine is fully down on the mount. Let's go ahead and finish tightening up these lower bolts. Make sure those are good and tight. And then install our two bolts for our heat shield on the mount itself. I want to go ahead and snug down our two 10mm bolts for our heat shield here. All right, now that we have both of these bolts nice and snug, our heat shield is snug, let's go ahead and install our wheel. Go ahead and grab your wheel, set that on. Let's go ahead and get our lug nuts all started by hand, and then we'll go ahead and snug those down. Let's go ahead and torque down our lug nuts to 110 foot-pounds. Now go ahead and put on your center cap. Just line that up. Pop that on and you're all set.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.